Kenobi Season 2 might finally give us the live-action Clone Wars story we've been waiting for, but whether it happens could all come down to how well Ahsoka Season 2 performs.
Mandalore!
As many of you have likely heard by now, the biggest Star Wars rumor so far this year has been making waves across the Star Wars fandom. According to well-known industry insider Daniel RPK, Obi-Wan Kenobi Season 2 is now in active development at Lucasfilm. As I said, this is just a rumor. Lucasfilm hasn't confirmed or denied that Kenobi Season 2 is coming out, and this comes as no surprise because an announcement of this magnitude, Lucasfilm would obviously want to wait to make some sort of huge announcement to celebrate Kenobi Season 2 coming out. But even so, this report has already sparked renewed discussion across the community, and honestly, this rumor kind of aligns with previous interviews and past leaks that we've been hearing about ever since the end of Season 1 of the Kenobi series. Let me know in the comments, do we even need a Season 2 of Kenobi? Do you want a Season 2 of the Kenobi show? Now, originally the Obi-Wan Kenobi expansion wasn't planned as a series. In the early years after Disney acquired Lucasfilm, the idea was to produce a standalone Kenobi film, part of a broader push to expand the galaxy through anthology movies like Rogue One and Solo: A Star Wars Story, and at one point Stephen Daldry was lined up to direct, with Hassan Amini, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, handling the script development, and early work on the project was already underway. But according to screenwriter Stuart Beattie, who worked on the original concept for the film, this wasn't just going to be a single film, it was meant to be a trilogy. Yes, we could have had a full Kenobi trilogy, with the first film focusing on Obi-Wan coming to terms with his failure with Anakin and learning to forgive himself. It was going to be a more grounded, introspective narrative centered on Obi-Wan's internal struggle and his quiet, distant relationship with a young Luke. The trilogy would have ended with Obi-Wan finally reconnecting with the Force, kind of like what we saw in Season 1 of Kenobi, and wrapping up with him learning how to communicate with Qui-Gon Jinn, which is how Season 1 of Kenobi ended. And apparently Darth Vader was never going to be in the original script. Now, to me, the movie still sounds like it misses some of the more pivotal moments in Kenobi's life. For example, how did Qui-Gon teach Obi-Wan the path to immortality? That doesn't get answered. And while it's not necessarily handled perfectly, I think including Darth Vader in the Kenobi series was a great choice. Still, I would have liked to see more of a focus on how their lives paralleled each other during this time period. But after the backlash to The Last Jedi and the box office failure of Solo, thanks to the boycott, Lucasfilm shifted direction, the Kenobi trilogy was shelved, and the focus moved towards streaming content for Disney Plus after the success of The Mandalorian. So instead of a Kenobi trilogy, we got a Kenobi series. And while I do think the series had its good moments, such as seeing Kenobi's daily life on Tatooine in the first 2 episodes, as well as seeing all the Jedi stuck in amber at Fortress Inquisitorius, the story at times did feel kind of too safe, almost like it was lazy writing, it had poor direction, and there were a lot of underwhelming moments. The show overall kind of felt like a missed opportunity. And adding to the controversy of the Kenobi series was the budget, because at $90 million across 6 episodes, Kenobi was the lowest budgeted live action Star Wars series to date. And for comparison's sake, The Mandalorian Season 1 came in around $120 million. The Acolyte reportedly cost $180 million. And Andor had a staggering $250 million budget for Season 1 alone, with a total spending across both seasons exceeding $650 million. And unfortunately, the low budget showed in Kenobi. Oftentimes, the visuals felt limited, and this could have been because of the heavy reliance on the volume, which made the environments very static and have flat lighting, which made moments that should have felt epic, like the duel between Obi-Wan and Vader, sometimes feel like it was lacking cinematic scale and atmosphere. Now, Ewan McGregor has been incredibly vocal about continuing Obi-Wan's story. Ever since the completion of Season 1, he's been saying he wants to return in interviews and at events like LA Comic Comic-Con last year, where he confirmed that he and Lucasfilm have been exploring ideas for a second season, saying, "We're definitely hoping," while exploring, that would be the word to say. But one of the ideas that Ewan's been most excited about is the potential of doing flashbacks. And why would he want to do flashbacks? Because he wants to wear Obi-Wan Kenobi's Clone Wars armor, the one from the animated series, The Clone Wars. He's talked about how much he'd love to bring that version of the character into live action, even if it means he has to wear the de-aging tracking dots for months. And that says a lot, because if you remember in interviews after Revenge of the Sith, Ewan talked about how much he hated working with CGI. But the real reason for why Ewan would want to do a season 2 of the Kenobi series is because he believes there's a few stories left to explore between the end of season 1 and Alec Guinness's portrayal in A New Hope, because there's nearly 10 years of untouched canon, enough time for Obi-Wan to grow, to rebuild his connection to the Force, and continue watching over Luke. Now, if you've been following me for a while, you know that I'm typically opposed to doing lengthy flashbacks in Star Wars, since traditionally George has avoided flashbacks throughout the movies, since it begins to make the story choppy at times, which we've witnessed in series like The Book of Boba Fett and The Acolyte, along with how flashbacks tend to eliminate the opportunity for future storytelling. But in this case, I think it could work if it gives us something meaningful, something that shows us the cracks forming between Anakin and Obi-Wan, moments we've never got to see before, like the cancelled Utapau arc from the Clone Wars, since that arc takes place right after Ahsoka leaves the Jedi Order, and you can really feel the shift in Anakin's trust in the Jedi Council, and it's beginning to break. He's angry, he's detached, and Obi-Wan's trying to hold it all together, trying to keep Anakin focused while the war keeps pulling them in different directions. It's subtle, but it's important because it shows how far they were beginning to drift before Mustafar, before the betrayal. And if a second season of Kenobi gave us even a glimpse of that through flashbacks or memories, it wouldn't just be filler, it would be character growth. Now, the biggest question in regards to a second season for the Kenobi series would be, is there any stories left to explore? And to me, if season 2 of Kenobi does happen, one of the most compelling directions it could take is exploring Obi-Wan's deeper journey into the Force. And we didn't really even get a glimpse of it until the final scene of season 1 with Qui-Gon Jinn's return. And to me, that's not really the end, it's just the beginning in his transition to becoming Ben Kenobi. Now, I think one of the stories that truly deserves to be explored is Obi-Wan's training under Qui-Gon. In canon, Qui-Gon was the first Jedi to discover how to retain his consciousness after death. But he didn't learn it from the Jedi Council, he learned it from an ancient spiritual path, one tied to the shaman of the Wills. Obi-Wan training under Qui-Gon Jinn to become one with the Force opens up the potential to explore new aspects of the Force that could tie the prequels to the original trilogy. We could see Obi-Wan go through a similar journey to Yoda's in the Clone Wars, where his path led him to the wellspring of life and meeting the Force priestesses. And if Obi-Wan follows a similar path, we could see him face his own illusions, his guilt over Satine, over Anakin, even his fear of fading into irrelevance. And this could all build towards Obi-Wan's transformation into the Obi-Wan we meet in A New Hope, the one who sacrifices himself so Luke can escape. A second season could let Obi-Wan travel through his visions, let him confront echoes of the past, temptations of attachment, maybe even confront a version of himself who still wants to fight the war. Because the Ben we meet in A New Hope isn't about power anymore. He's about peace, about letting go. And that's one of the most forgotten yet most powerful symbols of Obi-Wan's journey in A New Hope. By the time we meet him in A New Hope, Obi-Wan isn't trying to be a warrior anymore. He's not chasing battles, he's not chasing legacy. Everyone keeps calling Obi-Wan Kenobi a great warrior, but when we finally meet him, he's anything but. Leia's message starts off, "General Kenobi, you served my father in the Clone Wars." She's invoking the image of a battlefield legend, a tactician, a Jedi who led armies. And then Luke calls him a great warrior, clearly imagining some kind of galactic hero with a lightsaber always at the ready. But when we meet him, he's quiet, measured. He lives in the desert alone. He doesn't boast. He doesn't fight fight unless he has to. He's not the warrior they describe because he's moved beyond that, and that's what makes Obi-Wan's legacy so important. He was a warrior, he fought in the Clone Wars, he defeated Darth Maul, General Grievous, and even Anakin Skywalker, but all of that came at a cost. He lost his friends, he lost his faith, and he lost the Jedi Order. By the time we meet him in A New Hope, Obi-Wan has become something else entirely. He's not defined by combat anymore, he's defined by wisdom, by sacrifice, by hope, and that's the lesson. The galaxy remembers him as a warrior, but Obi-Wan's true strength was in choosing not to be one anymore, in laying down his blade when it mattered most, in guiding the next generation instead of trying to fight their battles for them. That's why his death on the Death Star isn't a defeat, it's a choice. A final act of peace would be the only way the Jedi could defeat the Sith, because in that moment, Obi-Wan becomes more than a warrior, he becomes a guide, a guardian, a part of the Force, and that's the version of Obi-Wan we never got to fully explore, not in the prequels, not even in season 1 of Kenobi, but with the second season, that could be the story of how we get there. But that all depends on Ahsoka season 2, because Ahsoka season 2 is the only live action Star Wars show that's officially moving forward, and Kenobi season 2's fate is dependent on how well Ahsoka season 2 performs. If Ahsoka underperforms, we may no longer get any live action shows in the future. Everything will probably just become movies, which honestly I think would be for the best. I think Star Wars should be mostly movies, and we can have shows in the form of animation. Once again, let me know in the comments if you want season 2 of Kenobi. I may not respond to every comment, but I do read them, and I kind of want to do a Q&A every video, so leave a comment and your comment or question could be featured in a video. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you give the video a like, and if you want more Star Wars news and lore, give me a follow. Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.